The year is 2025, a world transformed by technology yet still grappling with age-old conflicts. The glow of city lights across the Middle East belies the simmering tensions beneath the surface, a digital tapestry woven over a volatile landscape. The world holds its breath, watching, waiting. News headlines scream of impending doom, while serious faces of anchors fill our screens. Within the hallowed halls of the United Nations, diplomats scramble for solutions, but their words often seem lost in the rising tide of animosity. As Israel and Iran, once shadowy rivals, their animosity whispered in intelligence briefings and backroom deals, now face off in open conflict. The skies above the desert echo with the roar of fighter jets, and the ground trembles beneath the weight of advancing tanks. The sands of time are running out. Years of covert operations and proxy wars, fought in the shadows by clandestine figures and fueled by hidden agendas, have erupted into direct military engagement, a fiery spectacle of explosions and missile launches, captured in stark combat footage. The line between covert action and open warfare has been irrevocably crossed, drawing in global superpowers, each with their own strategic interests and alliances, positioning their military assets like pieces on a global chessboard, and leaving devastation in their wake. Bombed buildings stand as silent testaments to the destructive power of conflict, while the faces of displaced refugees tell a story of human suffering. This is not a sudden crisis, a bolt from the blue, but the result of decades of simmering tensions, a slow burn of history unfolding, political upheaval, the echoes of protests and revolutions resonating through the years, ideological clashes, the clash of beliefs and the waving of banners fueling the flames of discord, and a relentless struggle for regional dominance. A battle for control, for resources, for the very soul of the Middle East. From Tehran to Tel Aviv, two cities separated by geography but united in their anxieties, a dangerous game has escalated beyond control. Crisis management teams work around the clock, but the situation spirals further with each passing moment. The past 18 months, a period marked by a relentless barrage of news and escalating events, have redrawn the map of Middle Eastern conflict, shifting borders and creating new zones of instability, turning a Cold War hot. The temperature rising on the global stage, missiles streaking across the sky, carrying destruction and fear, cyber attacks, invisible battles waged in the digital realm, disrupting infrastructure and sowing chaos, and millions at risk. The lives of ordinary people hanging in the balance, their hopes and dreams threatened by the specter of war. The world, already fractured and unstable, grappling with economic woes and political divisions, now focuses anxiously on the Middle East. World leaders watch with growing concern, knowing that the consequences of this conflict could be catastrophic. The United States is drawn in, its military might deployed to the region, its diplomats working tirelessly behind the scenes. China calls for calm, urging restraint and offering to mediate, but the drums of war drown out diplomacy. The sounds of military preparations grow louder, while diplomatic efforts falter and fail. This is modern warfare, a clash of cutting-edge technology and ancient animosities, ancient hatreds passed down through generations, fueling the cycle of violence, advanced technology, blurring the lines between reality and virtuality, and a question on everyone's lips, a question that hangs heavy in the air, filled with uncertainty and dread. What happens next? The future is uncertain, a crossroads where the fate of the world hangs in the balance. We'll trace the escalation step by step, revealing the hidden agendas and the key turning points, not just through military maneuvers, but through the strategic decisions made in war rooms and the movements of troops on the ground, but through the lives of those caught in the crossfire. The stories of the civilians, the families torn apart, the human cost of this devastating conflict. This is Secret Confrontations: Israel versus Iran, a clash of civilizations, a battle for survival, a deep dive into a conflict pushing the world to the brink, a journey into the heart of darkness where the fate of nations hangs in the balance. To understand the firestorm of 2025, we must look back at decades of tension. Before the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Israel and Iran were unlikely partners, but Khomeini's rise turned Iran into Israel's ideological enemy, vowing to erase it from the map. Iran's nuclear ambitions became Israel's existential red line, fueling covert operations and cyber attacks like Stuxnet. Iran, claiming peaceful intent, pushed its program closer to weapons grade, deepening suspicion and escalation. Iran built a network of proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and forces in Syria, encircling Israel. Israel struck back with precision, while Iran retaliated through proxies and deniable attacks. By 2024 the pressure was unbearable, and the shadow war was about to explode into open conflict. As the world moved into 2024, the simmering tensions that had long defined the Middle East began to reach a boiling point. Years of proxy conflicts and covert operations were about to give way to something far more dangerous and direct. The shadow war, fought in the shadows for so long, burst into the open with a series of increasingly brazen acts. The old rules were discarded, and a new, more perilous game began. The first major escalation occurred on April 1st. An Israeli airstrike, a calculated move with far-reaching consequences, destroyed an Iranian consulate in Damascus, the capital of Syria. The strike resulted in the deaths of several senior Quds Force officials, a devastating blow to Iran's military and intelligence apparatus. The response from Iran was swift and unequivocal. Iran vowed revenge, promising a response that would shake the foundations of the region. And less than 2 weeks later, the world held its breath as the promised retaliation materialized. Iran launched over 300 drones and missiles, a massive aerial assault directly at Israel, a historic first, marking a significant departure from decades of proxy warfare. This was a direct confrontation, a line crossed that could not be uncrossed. Israel, aided by the US and allies, who had long maintained a strategic interest in the region, intercepted most of the incoming projectiles, preventing widespread damage and casualties. But the psychological impact was profound, shaking the sense of security and stability in the region and beyond. Israel retaliated with strikes inside Iran, targeting military installations and strategic assets, and a cycle of direct attacks began, each action provoking a reaction, pushing the region closer to the brink. The violence escalated, spiraling out of control as both sides dug in their heels. Then, in July, Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh, a key figure in the Palestinian militant group, was assassinated in Tehran, in a brazen operation that sent shockwaves through the region. This assassination sent a chilling message to Iran's proxies, demonstrating the reach and capability of its adversaries. Each move, each strike, each assassination made all-out war seem not just possible, but increasingly inevitable. By year's end, the already fragile situation was further destabilized by the collapse of Assad's regime in Syria, a longtime ally of Iran. This collapse cut Iran off from key allies and supply lines, significantly weakening its regional influence. The loss of Syrian support further weakened Hezbollah and Hamas, two of Iran's most important proxy forces. Yet despite these setbacks, Iran grew more aggressive, its rhetoric more bellicose, its actions more daring. With its proxy network faltering, Iran began acting directly, taking on a more prominent and dangerous role in the escalating conflict. The stage was set for a dramatic escalation, a final act that would determine the fate of the region. The world braced for the conflict's terrifying zenith, knowing that the next move could trigger a full-scale war. The culmination of these events was poised to occur in the summer of 2025. The rules of the old shadow war were gone, replaced by a new and terrifying reality of direct confrontation. The world held its breath as tensions mounted in the Middle East. On June 13, 2025, a day that would forever be etched in history, the unthinkable happened. Israel, feeling cornered and facing what it perceived as an imminent threat, launched a massive preemptive strike on Iran. The decision was made at the highest levels, a gamble with potentially catastrophic consequences. Waves of fighter jets screamed across the sky, and a barrage of missiles rained down, targeting Iran's most sensitive nuclear sites. The aim was clear: to dismantle Iran's nuclear capabilities before they could be used. The strikes focused on missile silos, hidden deep beneath the earth, and strategic command centers, the nerve centers of Iran's military apparatus. It was a bold attempt, a high-stakes gamble to eliminate what Israel saw as an existential threat to its very survival. Iran's response was swift and decisive. The nation mobilized its forces, preparing for a counterattack. In retaliation, missiles rained down on Israeli cities, turning bustling metropolises into war zones. Israel's air defenses worked overtime, launching interceptors in a desperate attempt to provide overwhelming defenses. But the sheer volume of the attack overwhelmed the system, plunging millions of Israelis into chaos and fear. For 12 long days, a brutal and devastating war engulfed the entire region, spreading instability and destruction. Civilian areas were hit indiscriminately, resulting in countless casualties and widespread suffering. Critical infrastructure was shattered, crippling essential services and plunging entire communities into darkness. Millions of lives were upended, as families were forced to flee their homes, becoming refugees in their own land. Despite the intensity of the initial strikes, Israel's arsenal couldn't reach Iran's most heavily fortified and deeply buried nuclear sites. Fearing further escalation and regional destabilization, the United States intervened militarily. Deploying advanced stealth bombers and launching devastating naval strikes, the U.S. aimed to neutralize the remaining Iranian nuclear threat. The combined might of the U.S. military succeeded in crippling Iran's nuclear program, pushing the country to the brink. Facing immense pressure and widespread destruction, the combined assault forced Iran to the negotiating table under the watchful eyes of international mediators. Finally, on June 24th, after weeks of intense fighting and diplomatic maneuvering, a ceasefire was announced, bringing a fragile peace to the war-torn region. The guns fell silent, and an eerie calm descended upon the battlefields. But the scars of war remained, etched deep into the landscape and the hearts of the people. The war, in its active phase, was over, but the underlying issues remained unresolved. The conflict, however, was far from over, simmering beneath the surface of a fragile peace. The ceasefire was only a temporary pause, a fragile truce, not a lasting resolution to the deep-seated tensions that plagued the region. While missiles flew, a second war raged in cyberspace. Iranian cyber attacks on Israeli infrastructure surged by 700%, targeting power grids, hospitals, and financial systems. Hackers hijacked CCTV and smart home cameras, turning civilians into unwitting intelligence assets. Israel's elite cyber units struck back, disrupting Iranian military communications and industry. Oil refineries shut down, transportation halted. Evidence of a sophisticated digital counteroffensive. This silent war was as critical as the battles in the air and on the ground. The conflict exposed the vulnerabilities of a hyper-connected world. In cyberspace, the war never truly ended. The future of warfare had changed forever. The war sent shockwaves across the globe, forcing powers to take sides. The U.S. intervention, led by Marco Rubio, was decisive, ending the war but deepening its alliance with Israel. China called for a ceasefire, condemning Israel's actions and seeking to mediate, but its influence was limited. The conflict shattered Iran's axis of resistance. Syria's collapse severed Tehran's land corridor, and Hamas and Hezbollah were left battered. Only the Houthis in Yemen emerged emboldened, continuing attacks on shipping and rising as a new regional power. The war didn't just weaken Iran's network, it reconfigured it. The balance of power in the Middle East was forever altered. The region faced a new, unpredictable reality. Beyond strategy and politics lies the human cost. Civilians in Israel, Iran, Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria endured terror, displacement, and loss. Air raid sirens, bomb shelters, and destroyed homes became daily realities. Human rights groups reported surges in civilian casualties, especially among women and children. Thousands fled, creating a new refugee crisis in a region already at its breaking point. For ordinary people, geopolitics means nothing. Their lives are measured in loss and fear. The true cost of war is found in shattered families and futures. The next generation grows up in the shadow of conflict they never chose. The June ceasefire brought silence, not peace. Core issues remain unresolved. Iran's nuclear ambitions persist, and Israel's resolve to prevent them is undiminished. The ceasefire is a fragile lid on a boiling pot. Diplomats scramble to turn truce into settlement, but deep distrust blocks progress. Iran's proxies regroup, the Houthis remain a wild card, and Gulf states watch warily. The region is frozen in high tension, not stability. The world remains on edge, knowing how quickly conflict can reignite. Diplomats search for a permanent off-ramp, but without real change, it's only a matter of time. The silence is not peace. It's the sound of reloading. The future remains uncertain. As the dust settles, urgent questions remain. Will the ceasefire hold, or is it just a pause before the next war? The human cost is staggering. Survival, loss, and fear define daily life. Can diplomacy bridge the chasm of distrust, or is the region doomed to endless cycles of violence? The future could bring more arms, races, and suffering, or courageous diplomacy and de-escalation. The choice lies with today's leaders, but the consequences will shape generations. The world waits, hoping peace can rise above the drums of war.